Testing, 1, 2, test. Oh, there we. Okay, now we're not peaking. Test, test. There we go. Hey. All right, that's the last one. Okay, so we're streaming now, I think.
Nice.
Yep, we are streaming. Let's hope this does not catch fire.
Sorry for late.
You're good. Don't worry about it.
I was writing my resume, finishing up.
Okay, great. All right, so let's go ahead and get started then. So we all know each other, but for purposes of the stream, hi, I'm Beege. This is Code Soul. We do IT education and related things in the greater Seoul area. Today we're going to cover resume and interview tips and tricks. This one's a little bit selfish because I've done a lot of hiring and I get a lot of terrible resumes and terrible interviews and I want to fix it. So hopefully we can all benefit from this. But let's go ahead and get started. So as usual, my disclaimer, this is just my personal knowledge and additional research I've done. I'm not an expert. I haven't written books on this. This is just the knowledge that I have. So, try out stuff yourself, see what works, see what doesn't, do your own research as well. I've linked to references at the end of the slides, but we're also going to do some practice, so make sure to catch your own insights as well. So today, let me make this bigger so I can actually see it. Oh, there we go. All right. Today, we're going to kind of split things into two parts. The first part will focus on the resume. The second part will focus on the interviews. So we'll start with a little bit of lecture style. I'll share some resume tips and tricks. We'll do some questions. And then after that, we'll do a live resume review. And then following that, we'll do the same for interviews. I'll share some interview tips. We'll do questions, and then we'll do a mock interview. If we run through things quite quickly, which we might, considering it's a small group today, we can do kind of peer resume reviews and mock interviews where we can kind of split into groups and do the same for each other. So that's the plan. This is the first time we're doing something like this, so it could be a giant train wreck or it could be awesome, or most likely something in between, but let's see how it goes. Any questions before we get started? Cool. All right, so on to resume tips. So this is gold right here, this tweet thread. I assume it's Twitter. I don't know. Anyway, the first major thing is check the job description. We get a lot of candidates who just apply for pretty much everything, and it just wastes a bunch of time for everyone. Or they say in their mission statement or objective or whatever, oh, I want to be a great data scientist, and then they apply for a back-end role. It's dude, no. Instant reject. So stuff like that. Other things are understand the company. Unless you're doing the resume spamming route, which is a totally viable strategy. But if you're trying to find a specific type of company and you want to be more selective, take some time to understand the company. Check their website. See what kind of news there is about them. Maybe check Glassdoor, or in Korea, it's what? Job Planet?
Yeah.
Yeah, Job Planet. So take some time to get an idea of the company, which you probably want to do anyway to make sure it's the kind of company you want to apply to. But yeah, that's kind of a key part, especially before the interview. Kind of do a review before or we'll get to the interview in a bit, but yeah. Another thing is when you're writing your resume, try to think from a manager's perspective. Now, a lot of people have never been a manager before, so they don't know how to imagine a manager's perspective. But things you can think about are what kind of skills might the manager be looking for, right? If they're hiring for a back-end engineer, I'm going to make a lot of back-end engineering references because that's most of my background. Sorry. But if they're looking for a back-end engineer, what kind of skills are they looking for? Well, can you write code? Do you know what an API is? Do you know how to use a database, right? Do you know how to work with front-end engineers? These kinds of things. And so you want to tailor your resume to target those kinds of skills, right? So you could say on your resume, worked with back-end team of 3 engineers, building a RESTful API, that kind of stuff. And then make sure to show how you demonstrated those skills, right? Actual project work you did, ideally within a company. Additionally, what kind of business value would you provide, right? You okay? Do you need a hand? Okay. No, it's all good. Just making sure everyone's cool. I mean, we're probably going to be pretty fast today since this is a small group, but yeah. So what's the kind of business value you provide, right? So if I hire you as a back-end engineer, right, what benefit does hiring you specifically give to the business, right? What is it that so first off, it requires understanding of what the role is, right, and where it fits within the company, and then how you can help the company through that role, okay? That's kind of the key thing that a manager is looking for. And then generally in pretty much every role, how do you work with a team, right? Have you worked on team projects? Do you know how to do teamwork things like pull request review or code reviews? Do you know how to do like project plans? Do you know how to do work management? All these kinds of things, okay? Now, those can usually be covered with just like a tiny one-line thing, and that's usually enough, but it's worth mentioning. And then avoid kind of fluff and nonsense, hence like this image right here, this image of text, because the internet is strange. So some people would say like, oh yeah, this one down on the bottom is great, that's perfect. But as a hiring manager, I'd be like, screw you. Now, to be fair though, stuff like zero cost overruns and zero safety incidents, like granted, if it wasn't changing a light bulb, that would be gold, right? That's something you would want to put in there. But changing a light bulb is such low risk, right? So you have to kind of, like, I know this is meant to be a joke, but we can use it seriously, right? If for simple tasks, you don't need to go at length, right? But for more complicated stuff, it's worth pointing out these kinds of details. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And then a key thing, be accurate. And by that I mean don't lie, that's obvious, but also don't embellish. Don't make things sound better than they were. You want to make them sound good, right? But you don't want to say like, oh, did hyperscaling of infrastructure for machine learning stuff, and it's like, oh, you set up like 10 servers, right? So don't embellish, be direct, because what ends up happening is you end up going there for an interview, you end up wasting your own time, you end up wasting their time. It's just wasteful, right? So don't embellish, be honest. A lot of people are very short-sighted. They're like, oh, I just want to get the interview, right? That's my goal. And then you go to the interview and you're like, wow, that sucked. Because you were way underqualified because you embellished your resume, right? And they're going to find that out during the interview, unless you're really good at bullshitting, which you might be. But then when you start work, same problem, right? So don't embellish. Also, minimize the details. That sounds weird, but you want to cover the key points without all of the details. The details can be covered during the interview, right? So cover what you did, why you did it, and how you did it, which we'll talk about again in a minute, and then nothing more, okay? That all can be discussed during an interview because they'll want to hear not only what exactly you did in detail, but also your thought process behind it. Who made the decisions? Why were those decisions made? What role did you play in the decision making? These are the things the manager cares about. And that's interview time, not resume time. Okay? And use a template. A lot of people are like, well, it's my resume, I want to make it like unique and stuff. It's like, if you're a designer, sure. If you're an engineer, man, it can just be a wall of text, right? Now granted, that's actually not ideal, but it doesn't need to be super unique. It doesn't need to be super special. It just needs to convey information. Now, my notes are out of order. That's fine. Now, for better or worse, how a resume looks does affect us, right? People will try to be objective, right? But if a resume is clean and clear and easy to read, that's going to benefit you, right? So using like a tiny font and crushing everything into one page, like that is the American style, but generally it's not good because then it takes the manager a lot more effort to read through it, and they're going to be like, this is so hard, and then they'll just rush and then move on to next, right? So try to find a template that fits what you're looking for and just use it. Don't spend too much time on the visuals part. Just find something good enough. And then proofread. Proofread. Holy shit, proofread, please. Because if your resume is full of like poor grammar or descriptions that aren't clear or typos everywhere, it's clear that you didn't spend time on it. And if you didn't spend time conveying information to me, I'm not going to spend time getting more information from you. I'm just going to throw it out. So like if I see more than like 4 or 5 typos, I just trash it, right? Because it's like, you didn't even bother to check, dude. Like if this is how you're going to do in a resume, I bet your code's going to be even worse. So make sure to proofread, have a friend proofread, all this kind of stuff. So far, so good? Cool. Yeah, okay. Okay, so I should have moved that over. Okay, anyway. Now this may not be relevant for everyone. This is more for newer people, but customize your resume for the role, right? So let's say you are trained as a full stack engineer, right? You can do front end and back end, but you're applying for back end roles, right? You should mention your front end stuff, but most of your focus should be on your back end experience, on your back end skills, okay? And then maybe you are applying for all of the above. Maybe you're applying for back end, front end, and full stack. Well, then you want to have 3 different versions of your resume. You don't need to tailor it for every single job, but you do want to tailor it for each type of role, okay? Now, if you've been in your career for a while and you're happy with where you've specialized, you generally don't need to worry about this because your experience is already customized for the role. But if you're trying to either change your direction or if you're still a generalist and you're trying to specialize, then this is useful, okay? This is kind of obvious, but actually describe the work you did. I've had resumes where it's just like a company name and then a list of what the company does and then a title, like their job title. And it's like, trash. So like describe the work you did, because setting up interviews is a lot of effort for both the company and the candidates. I'm not going to spend that effort unless I think it's worth it. If you haven't given me enough information for me to determine if it's going to be worth it, I'm not going to waste the time. Okay? Does that make sense? Include the dates and time span you worked in a role. This helps a lot. You don't necessarily need the time span. When I say time span, it's like, 3 months as a backend engineer or 2 years as a backend engineer or whatever, right? That's helpful, but at the very least include the dates. You absolutely need the dates. Because they want to see how long ago it was, so they have expectations of like how old is your knowledge. Because things change quickly, you may not remember things, all this kind of stuff, that's important. And they want to see how much time you spent working on certain types of areas, right? So going back to the full stack example, let's say you worked as a full stack person for 3 years, but it was like 5 years ago, right? And maybe you did a whole bunch of front-end stuff for the 5 years in between, and now you're applying for a back-end role. It's like, okay, all of your back-end knowledge is 5 years old at this point, right? And you only had 3 years of experience, or however many I said, in the past. So that's going to set my expectations of, how skilled of a back-end engineer are you, okay? So make sure to include your dates. Include your GitHub. This should be obvious, but it's not a lot of the time. If I get a resume with a GitHub on it, I'll skim through the resume quickly, and then I'll go look at the GitHub. And then I'll come back to the resume. Because the point of the job for software engineers is to write code, right? There's a lot of meetings, a lot of requirements collection, a lot of communication with the customer and stuff, but at the end of the day, the code is the deliverable, right? So if the quality of code is not what I expect, trash bin. If the quality of code is good, I'm going to rush you through the process, right? So.
I have a question, but if the work is like a company, you did from a company, then should you include it? Because for
no.
security issues, right?
Right. So the question was, if most of your work is for a previous company, do you include that in your public GitHub? No. When you work for a company, any code that you write belongs to that company. You are not free to share it in most countries and legal systems. Now, if you came straight out of school right into a company, and then you only worked for that company, you didn't do any side projects, maybe you don't have anything on GitHub, and that's fine. Then you can just leave it out, right? But then be prepared to like make sure your description of your company work is really good, right? Make sure it's super clear, make sure it's the kind of thing where it's like, hey, I want to learn more about what you did because I want you to do the same thing here, kind of stuff. Does that make sense? Cool. Other questions before we continue?
Do you think it is good to include the GitHub even when I'm not a software engineer?
So the question was, do you think it's worth including your GitHub when you're applying for a role that's not software engineering? That's a good question. I've only hired for software engineering roles. Actually, no, that's not true. I've hired for PM roles. But I'm a back-end I'm an engineer, so, well, not anymore. But I would say if the role you're applying to has a technical component, I think it wouldn't hurt. I think if you're applying for a completely non-tech related role, just leave it out. Because if the, like, I'm imagining a manager who's non-technical, just seeing this resume, seeing like, oh, let me check their LinkedIn, let me GitHub, what's that? Click, it's like, what the hell is going on, right? And that might just confuse them more than help. I don't have a strong answer. I think it depends on the type of role you're applying for. If it has a technical aspect to it, I'd say go for it. If it does not have a technical aspect to it, or it's not related to technology at all, I'd say leave it out. But I'm not very confident in that answer.
Let's say I want to apply for some kind of reverse engineering technical position.
Oh.
But I only have like a side, like a personal projects that I've done with, let's say, Python, which has nothing to do with C or C++.
So the question is, if you're applying for like a reverse engineering kind of role, and you have a bunch of Python on your resume, but the role is more like C, C++ kind of stuff, is it helpful? I'm not sure, honestly. I don't know what the day-to-day work of reverse engineering is like. I would say it's probably not terribly helpful, but I don't think it would hurt either. But again, I'm not very confident because I'm not familiar with that area of expertise. Does anyone else have knowledge on that? No? Yeah, I'm sorry I don't have a great answer for you, but I'd say it probably wouldn't hurt. Yeah.
So what if you, let's say, learned like a software architecture pattern from a book, applied it to your company, and because that pattern is kind of generic, like you want to kind of show it off in your personal GitHub too, you technically did apply that pattern to the company code, but because it's generic, when you do it off for your own personal project, it's like similar.
Yeah.
So it's like, is that okay, or like?
Yeah, so that's so the question was if you like learned some kind of software pattern and you implemented it at a company, but you also wanted to implement it for a personal project to show off, is that okay? I would say yes, because if you look at, so software usually falls under copyright rather than patent or trademark, which wouldn't make any kind of sense, but anything like that. And copyright is the expression of an idea, right? So the exact code that is written. So as long as you're not copying and pasting code, I think you're good from a legal perspective. Now, but I am not a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer, YouTube. Yeah. But does that make sense?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think as long as you're re-implementing it, you're fine.
Yeah.
Other questions before continuing? Cool. When it comes to, I should have put a star on this next bullet point, but there is a kind of optimal way to order your resume in terms of content. I would put work experience at the top, followed by education, followed by projects. But education should be quite small. And this is specific to Korea, okay? Because in the US, I might put projects above education. But in any case, this is just for someone who already has some amount of experience, right? If you have no relevant job experience, you probably want to put work experience lower. Again, everything kind of falls back to like, think from a manager's perspective. What is the manager going to be interested in, right? If you worked at like the campus library, like shelving books, right? You don't want to put that at the top of your resume. You'll want to put your projects or your education first, this kind of stuff, okay? Or if your education is in a completely unrelated field, maybe you want to put that below projects, right? So I should probably rewrite this bullet point, but order in terms of what you think is strongest, right? Your work experience is usually strongest, followed by education, followed by personal projects, usually. But your experience may be different.
So, what if my projects are like mostly kind of relevant to the positions that, so for example, like I did some intensive course for the security recently. That's what I did. So recent experience which is relevant to the job that I want to find, and projects would be on the top.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, so the question was if I'm kind of changing direction and I've done a bunch of projects relevant to the job I'm applying for, should I put those at the top? I would say yes. Put the most relevant thing at the top, right? Whether it's maybe you did a whole bunch of like non-tech work in the past, but you end up getting a tech degree, put the degree at the top. If you, like you said, have been doing a bunch of projects, but maybe your education or maybe your other experience is not related, put the projects at the top. That kind of stuff. Now there is, I'm not sure how much you can do about this, but there is, like as a hiring manager, when I see projects at the top, I immediately think, oh boy, it's a student. Entry level, right? But that's not necessarily bad. If they're hiring for entry level, that's fine. Or if the project is particularly impressive, that can work. But just one thing to kind of be aware of. But until you get some work experience, you don't really have much of a choice. So, but it's just something to be aware of.
It's aligned with what you said, like to be accurate.
Right. Yep. So like you're entry level, and then they're going to be like, hey, we'd be okay with an entry level. Let's go ahead and talk, or not. Move on, and then you just start spamming your resume. Yeah. Again, I mentioned earlier about the whole like understand the company that you're applying to. If you don't have a lot of experience, if you're early in your career, right, or early in the career area that you're shooting for, it may not be worth taking the time to understand each company. It may be better to just spam things, right? And that's fine. Just make sure it's a conscious decision, okay? Have reasons for your decision making. But yeah. So earlier on in your career, you probably just want to be spamming your resume, and that's totally cool. And that actually has some other beneficial side effects that we'll talk to when we get to the interview side of things. So another thing is order your work experience, and I would say projects too, and descending time order. So most recent first. Because your most recent knowledge is going to be your strongest knowledge, and that's what you'll want them to ask you about the most, and that's what they'll be most interested in, and it just makes sense. Okay, so most recent at the top, pretty simple. This one's quite important in the modern day. List your skills somewhere on your resume. Okay, even if it's just like a straight list, totally fine. Reason is that these days humans are not the only ones reading your resume. There's some, in the past they called it OCR, optical character recognition, where they'd have basically bots just crawl resumes online or crawl resumes that were submitted to them if they have a huge amount of resumes coming in. Nowadays they have a more advanced system called an applicant tracking system, which basically does the same thing. So even my current company, we use an applicant tracking system called Workable. And it'll read your resume, it'll pull out how long you've been working at different companies, what kind of skills you have, all that kind of stuff, and so we can just see a summary. So definitely put that in there. Now, that said, you also want to mention skills in your description. And you're thinking, well then, wait, you want me to list my skills twice? Yes. Because many people put skills towards the top, which is totally fine as long as you don't take up too much space. But we'll see that when we go over a resume review. that's good for the hiring manager to get a quick overview, and for OCR, it just makes things faster. I'll say OCR because that's what I'm most experienced with, but it's also ATS. The two are the same from when I'm talking about it. In reality, they're two different systems, but I get them confused. Sorry. But yes, it makes it easier for OCR, but that doesn't matter. It's a computer. But for a person, seeing like, if I'm hiring again for a backend role and I see like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, jQuery, I'm going to be like, Whereas if I see things like, Fast API, Django, Express, Spring Boot, I'm going to be like, okay, cool. Let's keep going. Let's do this. And then the reason you want to mention them in your work experience descriptions is that I should have been more specific here, not just description. In your work experience descriptions, I apologize, is because I want to see when you use those skills and how long you use them for. And that's why you put dates on your experience. So if I see on your resume, hey, the last company I worked at was for like 3 years, we used Spring Boot. Before that, we used Django for 2 years or something like that at a previous company. I'll be like, okay, so this person knows all the web frameworks, right? And maybe we're hiring for Django now, but they did Spring Boot more recently. I know what kinds of questions to ask them, how to make sure they know the differences, if they know how Django has changed, these kinds of things. Does that make sense? Cool. Questions? Yeah.
Usually I put my projects inside my work experience, like the company name and my working time and the projects I do. But I don't put the separate projects like other things.
So the question was, if you kind of, within your work experience, you group your work in projects and then describe each one with dates and all that, is that okay? And I would say absolutely, yes. It does make things much clearer. It does take up more space on a resume, which might be a concern. But, I mean, these days, at least in Korea, CVs are okay, where it's just like everything you've ever done. And so the length doesn't really matter. If you're going that style, totally, excellent, wonderful, please do.
Or you mean the projects, when you say projects, is it side projects?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so when I mention projects in this context, in the previous context, I was talking about like side projects. Yeah, thank you for checking. I should have made that clearer. Other questions before going forward? Cool. How are we doing on time? We'll be about on time if I finish this one quickly. So this top one is controversial. A lot of people disagree with me, but for IT stuff, I think summaries and objectives are not helpful. I don't think they do anything to help you. Some people may disagree with me, but usually when I review resumes, I straight up skip that. Don't even look at it. Unless I start deep diving someone's resume, where I'm like, okay, they're looking good, let me go into this in more detail. The reason I don't think it's helpful is because your objective is clear. You're trying to get a job, right? Like, maybe if you're trying to do a career change, it makes sense, but yeah, what's up?
I mean, like cover letter on the top.
Yeah. And so like a cover letter is different. Cover letter is totally fine. But I'm talking like that little like personal summary or personal objective at the top of the resume.
Yeah.
No. Now granted, that's my preference. Other hiring managers may disagree. That's just my thinking on it. You're trying to get a job, right? That's your objective. However, if you're doing a career change, then it might be helpful. Because then it makes it clear like, hey, look, I know my experience is this. These are my transferable skills. I am trying to change career, right? Because otherwise, if I see like irrelevant experience and I don't see a reason why, or I can't imagine how your skills would transfer, then I'm gonna be like, eh. But if in your objective you're like, I have this many years of experience as this, and I believe that these skills that I can take from this area can be put towards this type of role, then I'll be like, okay, I can understand that argument. All right, let's go ahead and keep going. So at least that's how I look at it. But if it's just like your background is in the area that Your background, skills, and experience are in the same area that you're applying for. No, man, don't waste the page space. Don't waste the real estate. Big thing is quantify things if you can. Now, you can't always quantify things, but if you can, do so. Numbers are good. For example, if you worked on a web service that served 40 million transactions a day or something, I'm just making up numbers, I would want to see that, right? Or I want to know what size of team you worked with, or I want to know how many microservices you managed, or I want to know what scale you were working at, right? All of these are helpful and useful. Also, seeing numbers in a resume gives us the impression, whether it's accurate or not, gives us the impression that you're kind of detailed, metrics-oriented person. And metrics are good, right? This is engineering, right? We want to measure things and try to find efficiency. So having your resume written as such looks good for you. Now, granted, you may not always have metrics, right? But if you do, put them in there. If you don't, okay, no big deal. Keep going. When it comes to format, PDF, please. Not everyone uses Windows. Please, PDF. I have seen some places that are like, oh, we hate PDF, don't do PDF. And then they're like, do Microsoft Word. And it's like, no. What if I don't have a Windows machine, right? PDF works on everything. And it's good enough, right? Yeah. Don't use HWP. Do not use Hangul word processor. No. Never.
Some companies are forced to use.
Yeah, if a company requires it.
Maybe for
What's up?
Don't go to those companies.
Yeah, don't go to companies that require that. Dude, I remember, so like for companies that have lots and lots and lots of applicants, they will use the stupidest filtering mechanism. The first company I worked at, if you had a Hotmail or a Yahoo account, HR just threw out your resume.
What?
Yeah, because they got so many applications that they're like, we can't have the hiring manager look at all of these. We need some way to filter, but we're not knowledgeable in the area. Let's use an arbitrary filter. Oh, Hotmail and Yahoo are like the old people who don't know how to use tech, right? So let's just throw those out. Not the best metrics, but yeah, there's a lot of nonsense going on in there. So, there's a lot of arbitrary stuff, and sometimes you just get screwed by bad luck. So don't sweat it too much. But try to make things as easy as you can by doing like PDF. If they're filtering on PDF, screw them, right? Yeah. Another thing that's helpful, just logistics, put your name in the name of the file. Last name first, preferably, for foreigners. It just makes stuff way easier. Because often, like, if you look at my downloads folder, it's just a bunch of resumes. And it's like, man, all these resumes are named resume, but I'm looking for, like, Hong Gil-dong's resume. I'm never going to find it, right? So yeah, put your name in the file name. It's a tiny thing, but it makes a big difference for the hiring managers and recruiters. When it comes to writing your resume, a lot of people are like, well, wait, there's ChatGPT. Can I use that to write my resume? And you can. But it's not going to be great. It doesn't know your detailed experience. It doesn't know metrics for you, right? I actually did it as an example. Pull this up real quick. So I gave it a little bit of work experience stuff. Yeah, let me just put this up here. Okay. So I'd say, like, write me a resume. I worked at SKT doing backend engineering with Java Spring Boot. I worked at PUBG using C# and Terraform for data infrastructure. So it gave me this template. So it gave me an objective. I already don't like that. Gave me education at the top. I don't like that. Skills, okay, that's good, but I don't necessarily need, like, this kind of stuff. I could just be like Spring Boot, C#, Terraform, SQL, database design, right? It can just be a list. Work experience, okay, cool. This is actually not terrible, but it still needs some work, which we'll talk about in a minute. The hell? Oh. But the thing is, this is good for inspiration, right? Because it may mention something that like, oh, I didn't think about putting that on my resume. This isn't accurate to what I did, but it gives me the idea of like, oh yeah, I did this thing, I should put it in there, okay? So ChatGPT, great for inspiration. Don't use it to write the resume for you, okay? Sorry?
Copy and paste.
Yeah, don't just copy and paste. And then like this stuff, this is fine. References available upon request. I don't think you need to put that. Like, if they want references, they'll ask. But yeah, some people like to put that. And then we'll use some more ChatGPT stuff later. But so last thing, here is like the golden template for your work item description things, okay? Accomplish business goal by some work that you did using some technology, okay? If you can do that for every work description item, and if you can include metrics, you win, period. If your whole resume is just that, like, you're getting an interview, okay? Unless your experience is going a different direction than what they're looking for. But in terms of quality of your resume and conveying information, that's exactly what they're looking for.
Like business goal could be project, right? Or,
So like, for example, business goal would be saved a bunch of money, right? So, or did something that added a bunch of users, or improved the user experience by reducing the page load time by like 2 seconds or something. I don't know.
something you did.
Yeah, but something that had a business impact, right? Whether it's an impact on the function of the application, an impact on the cost of the business, an impact on the efficiency of other teams or your own team, these kinds of things, right? So like a DevOps engineer, you could say, reduced testing time by, actually have one from my experience. Reduced build time from 20 minutes to 60 seconds, improving developer efficiency by basically refactoring Maven configurations, right? That's on my resume. And like people see that and they're like, yo, I want to make our Maven faster, right? So that kind of stuff. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Cool. So again, this if there's nothing else you get out of this whole resume thing, that's the important one. Business goal, what you did to achieve it, and technologies you used. Okay? Also, it shows that you are like the reason we do work is for the success of the business so that we can in turn get paid, right? So if you show that you're focusing on the success of the business, you're focusing on business goals, you're doing exactly what you should be doing. That's exactly what the manager wants to see. Okay? Cool. So any questions about all that stuff or anything generally?
But companies usually, even you have a good resume, companies ask you to fill up their template sometimes, like their own resume, or they send a link and you have to fill up.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's really annoying.
Yeah.
Sometimes you feel
Yeah. So the question or comment really was, sometimes companies have you fill out the resume on their ATS or on their application system or whatever, and you already have your resume written, but they want you to submit the resume and fill in the stuff. I'm embellishing a little bit, but yeah, it sucks. It's stupid. I don't know why they do that, but
Saves time, right?
it saves time, but then
Maybe they lose a lot of good potential that good employees. Some others just don't reply.
yeah.
Korean big companies like do that every time.
Yeah.
Even small companies, my company.
Yeah. So I think that kind of stuff comes from a couple of places. Is one, maybe they haven't actually tested the tool from a user side, and they don't know that it requests all that info. Maybe they think it pulls it out of the resume, and it's like, no, the applicant is entering it directly. Maybe they don't know that. But on the other hand, I could see like they want they want that information in a structured format so that they can do analytics and stuff. But then they also want your resume because that has all the detail and the descriptive stuff that the manager will want to see. But I would say a company that has a system that doesn't automatically pull it out of your resume is not focusing very hard on their recruiting, right? They're not investing in their recruiting because there are systems that can pull that information out now, right? So when that happens, you need to think, okay, this either means their recruiting is understaffed because they didn't bother to check the user experience, or they're not investing in the tools, and is that a problem, right? Now, recruiting is not a core competency of most companies, right? The companies don't exist to recruit. They exist to do whatever their business model is, right? So it's kind of up to you whether or not you want to fault them. Personally, I think it's just like, it sucks, but what you gonna do? But yeah, it does suck. Yeah. Was there a question you had with that, or was it like the why do people do that kind of thing? You wanted to discuss, yeah. It's like, it sucks, but I get it. Other questions, or venting even? Cool. All right, so let's do a quick little live resume review. So Jason submitted his resume, but I thought it would be better to do for the mock interview. Does anyone want to submit an anonymized version? It's anonymized? Okay, can you send it to me on Discord? Okay. I'm gonna check it on this screen. Well,
It's really bad, but
that's actually perfect. I'm hoping it'll show up here first when I open it, because I want to double check and make sure that there's none of your personal info in there before I put it on the screen.
Right.
But I don't know if it's.
I tried to make it anonymous.
Yeah. I just want to double check it because I don't want to dox you, you know?
Should I DM you then?
It doesn't matter. Or that'd probably be easiest. Sure, I wonder if we have anyone on YouTube. I don't see anyone on there. We have 0 viewers. That's fine, though. That's what I expected. This is more for recording than anything else. Oh, did you send it? Okay, there it is. Message requests. Accept. Add you as a friend. Alright, and you're still uploading it?
Is it? I think it's ready.
I only see hi. Try again.
Oh,
There we go. Okay, good. It did come up on this screen. Oh, DocX!
Yeah, it's Word.
I don't know. I don't know if I can open it, but we're going to find out. Oh, actually, I have Open Office, so let's see if...
It should work.
Yeah.
But the
Formatting might be messed up.
Can I make the PDF?
No, it's fine.
Make it easy to
Okay, this...
PDF.
Alright, the format looks good enough.
Just worked on Word.
Word also can come into
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Word can output PDF, but don't worry about it for now. Let me just go through and make sure there's nothing that's going to dox you.
Oh, you opened it.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, that should be good. All right, so let's do it. Let me make sure the stream is okay. All right. So, oh, this is gonna be awkward. Let me change this real quick. Okay. So, because I need to speak here because I don't have my headset today. So first off, in terms of format is great. Maybe you could, you're not really in want of space. 2 pages is probably okay, given what it looks like your experience here. If you did, I'm not saying you need to do this now, but later, if you get to the point where you do want to consolidate space, I would actually collapse this and put it like into here or something.
right? But for now, I think it's probably fine. This is good. I might, again, for efficiency, I might have like some of this on the left side, some of it on the right side, split it into 2 columns kind of thing. But again, that's just nitpicking. Let's get into the details. What is this? Yeah, that's fine. So, all right, let me, sorry. First, I'll go through it as if I'm a manager, just trying to read the resume, and then I'll do the analysis, okay? So I'll just think out loud as I'm going through it.
Anonymous resume.
Well, anonymous for the internet. Yeah. All right, so, oh, you mean like for me reviewing? Yeah, that's fine. Okay, I don't care about this. Boot camp. Okay, so entry level data analysis using neural network algorithm. Wait, what? There's a boot camp just for that? Oh, that's certification. Okay. Yep. Text analytics. Yep, that's fine. Yep. Never heard of this. We'll look into that later. Good, because we use that. Good. Basic stuff. Cool. Basic stuff. Okay, so text guy. Got it. Let's see. Okay, cool. So computer vision, but software engineer. So was he doing ML or was he doing the software? Let's see. Data pre-processing. So that's kind of data engineering stuff. Okay, now we got some machine learning kind of stuff. Yep. Cool. Okay, so it looks like summarize is like some text-based machine learning, a little bit of computer vision, a tiny bit of data engineering, and voice. Okay, so voice. Yeah, okay. And what? This is completely different.
I think the 2 roles kind of.
Yep. Oh, this was 2 in the same thing?
Same job.
Okay, that was not.
So
these are
I
different
worked
projects.
as a software engineer. So.
Got you.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's fine. Yep, Android. Yep. Okay. So let's see. So one thing that's kind of missing from this whole thing that I probably should have prepared for, I apologize, because I had I pulled a resume from online to go with, and I had a whole thing set up with that, and I forgot to do the same prep for this. I was going to ask what kind of role you were applying to.
Oh, so it's ML.
What kind of ML?
What do you mean by
Text, computer vision,
actually,
voice and audio.
I'm looking for anything.
Just for purposes of this exercise, just pick like a job that you applied to.
Okay. Then I guess vision.
Vision.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So, all right. So vision. So I'd basically skip this and I'd focus here. Okay. So this is not bad, but there's some key stuff missing. I don't know what volume you worked at. Looks like you were there for about a year, but you were split among multiple projects. So I don't know exactly how much time you spent on the computer vision part.
I guess I missed that.
Yep, it's all good. I mean, that's why we're doing this, right? Like if you thought your resume was perfect, you wouldn't be here. So no worries. Yeah. So this was certification. So I would, if you were using the computer vision one as an example, I would actually put this. Oh. Wait, so this was a 2-year boot camp?
No, it's 3 months.
3 months? Oh, I can't count. Jesus. That's why you put time spans. In case you have like managers who can't read like me. Okay, so yeah, I would definitely, if you were applying to, now I know that you weren't anticipating like a computer vision specific role, so you didn't have the chance to customize, but if you were applying to a computer vision role, I would actually put this under your work experience, especially because this is more recent and more relevant. Another thing too, I would use consistent date formats. Whoa! I would use consistent date formats across the whole thing. Just because like the way the mind works, like you figure out how you're parsing the date and then that's what you are kind of primed for. So I would kind of put this in the kind of as a description under here kind of thing. And then I would talk more about the kind of projects you did, right? Because you did some kind of projects as part of this boot camp, right?
Oh yeah.
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 So I would describe like, because you described all the tools you used, but not what you kind of did with them, like, right? So you used, what did you crawl off the web, right? Sure, you did some pre-processing and some hyperparameter tuning, but like what kind of problem space, right? Because again, it should be kind of, yes, this is not a business, yes, this is not work experience, but I want to see the kind of business result, right? So if it was something like, keeping it relevant to the topic, like, let's say did, what is the word for that? Oh my God, what is when you give like a score to something? Graded CVs, collected. I'm just making something up. I don't know what you actually did. Collected online via web scraping, using, or maybe collected some number. CVs collected online via web scraping, using, what would it be? Maybe you used Beautiful Soup, Pandas, Pandas, scikit-learn, all this kind of stuff, right? And then, maybe analyzed or determined sentiment around Elon Musk's acquisition of Twitter using the Twitter API, scikit-learn, pre-processing, tokenization, right? So I can't type, but you get the idea. Does that make more sense?
So more specifically with this.
Yeah. So like maybe this is probably too wordy because I'm coming up with this on the fly. Like I'm not being very concise. But you could do like, you could probably just say like, did sentiment analysis on recent news, right? Using, right, something like that. And again, any metrics you could use. So on maybe number recent news tweets, right? So it has some idea of the scale, right? This kind of stuff. And then going down here. So I would say if you're applying to a computer vision role where like, they know what these libraries are, I think you don't need to say Python, right? Because they're all Python libraries. So you can probably just remove the Python bit. But you would still want to keep it in a skills section. Yeah, you would probably want to make just a quick skills thing where you basically like extract all the tools and stuff. You just put them in that list because the OCR ATS is going to look for Python. What's up?
So can I add something?
Yeah.
Like, for computer vision, you can add like you did object detection projects or tracking, object tracking. Yeah. The things you can do by computer vision, and you can add some projects usually do with computer vision.
Yeah, I guess I didn't involve in
So
this kind of group project, and I only did data pre-processing to feed into the model.
Okay.
So that was the part I did.
Okay. So I would just say that, right?
Okay, yeah.
So I'd say something like built data pre-processing, I guess workflow or pipeline, for crack detection, ML training, using whatever, right?
Yeah, I included it in the below, if you see.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'd be curious, like, you know, what kinds of images, right? What kinds? Whoa, how many? Again, volume. So I would say created, right? Hand labeled. Okay. So I would probably this I would reword this, but the idea of this one's great. So when you say visualize label patches, do you mean like a graph? Do you mean like you built a visualization tool? Like
I built so for patches.
Mm.
I made the visual, just drew it on the image of the like the.
oh, so you just overlaid the patches onto the image?
Yeah.
And did you build like desktop software to do that? Did you build a web thing to do that? Was it in some other program? Was it just something with like matplotlib or something? Or
Yeah, Matplotlib.
okay,
Yeah, CV2 kind of you can do that on.
gotcha. So you could say something like,
I guess Matplotlib.
yeah, okay. So you could say overlaid patch labels onto images using matplotlib. But why did you do that? What purpose did that serve? Overlaid.
Purpose it was to
Was it for like quality control?
yeah, a quality test, I guess.
Yeah,
Or
okay.
to see if it's okay. It turned out.
So did quality control of data by overlaying patch labels onto images using matplotlib, right? So that's like, what was the business result? Was, you know, making sure the data was good for ML training, right? How did you do that? You overlaid patch labels. What did you use? Matplotlib. Yep, kind of the golden standard of how to describe stuff. How are we doing on time? We're a little bit over what I anticipated. But is that helpful? Do people kind of see the process? What's up?
The question is, your format and his format, the difference, like he could like use the language in Python or use libraries like Keras, TensorFlow.
Mm.
So, but you don't recommend this format?
So I would say I would get rid of the language because that's implied by these. Again, I would put them in a separate section just for OCR purposes because the human will understand this, right?
Yeah.
As for use libraries, I think this is probably okay. Unless you mention them down here. I would prefer mentioning them in the tasks. I would do something like, you know, using
Okay.
Librosa or whatever. But I could still see arguments for doing this. I wouldn't say this is bad.
Yeah.
Okay? It might not be necessary, but I don't think it's going to hurt you if you do it. So, does that make sense?
Make it boring, like if you put
Nah.
the same like format, use this library, this person use this.
No, that's fine. That's totally fine. Because like when a manager is going through a resume, they're trying to do it as quick as possible because they probably have a bunch, right? And so if your structure is consistent, that's going to help them process things faster.
This is what I've always thought.
Yeah. But good question. So like this kind of stuff can be helpful but might not hurt you if it's not helpful. So I'd say it doesn't hurt to do it. But again, you have to balance like how much space you're taking on your resume versus this kind of stuff. But yeah, other questions?
Like some maybe your current company, you did a lot of projects, and your before, remind me, your first company, you did this smaller projects, not much. So, but when you put the projects in the first company, you put a lot of projects list, and is it okay? Like, is it if you put everything you
Mm.
need, it's like really deep.
So it depends on if you're doing more CV style or resume style, right? Resume style is like pack everything you can into like 1, maybe 2 pages, right? Whereas CV style is like tell us everything. I want to hear your life story kind of thing. It depends on which kind of style you're going for or which kind of style they request. In Korea, in my experience, they don't really make a distinction between the two. I would say that. So repeating your question, so let's say like at my first job, I had like a bunch of different projects, but that was a long time ago at this point. Do I still list every project individually on the resume? I would say that if it was a long time ago, probably not. You can probably just summarize the whole experience as just like single bullet points for each project is probably sufficient. Unless all of it was highly relevant to what you're applying to and you don't have more recent relevant experience. Yeah. So again, like you want to show them what they want to see while being accurate and truthful. So if like your first job, you were there for like 7 years, right? And then maybe your last 4 years, you had 2 other jobs where you're doing something unrelated to what you're applying for, keep those short. And then maybe for the first job, list all the projects, right? But maybe you did like 10 projects in 2 years at your first company, but it was like 8 years ago. Bullet points are fine. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Other questions or comments? I know we didn't go through every line because we're tight on time, but is that helpful to you?
Yes.
Cool.
I rushed it writing. Sorry for the.
No, that's totally fine. So like, this is still better than a lot of other resumes I've read. You're good. Don't
I
worry.
did it quickly, so forgive me.
No, dude. Like, this is not. I'm not assessing you or grading you, right? I'm just trying to give you
I
tips.
feel a little bit embarrassed, that's all.
I hear you. That's totally natural. You're fine. Don't worry about it. I'm sure that once you take more time on this, it's going to be beautiful.
But the question is, so what I wrote as a software engineer.
Yeah.
What should I write it as?
Ooh, so the question is, given this experience, should he mention himself as a software engineer or no? I would say this one. Damn. I was going to say like, oh, just do machine learning engineer, but this is different.
Should I just developer? Delete that part?
Well, another thing you could do is you can change your structure. So you can make the company the big item, right? And then you can have your role as a sub item. And then you can say, these are the projects I did as a machine learning engineer. These are the projects I did as like a software engineer
Oh, okay.
at the same company, right? So like using myself as an example, I first started as a senior backend engineer. Then I became an engineering team lead, and now I'm a PM team lead, right? So I would, on my resume, on my LinkedIn, they're all under the same company, but I have each role distinctly and the type of work that I did in each role. And that makes it much easier for people to parse. Yeah. Good question. Any other questions?
What about the links? Like if I made some like slides or documents for the projects that I did, is it okay to include the links so that they could open the document?
So the question was, should I include links for things that I can link to? Yes, absolutely. Anything that can give them a better idea, a better understanding of the work that you did, do it without like taking up too much time. But it's their choice whether to click the link and their choice how much of it to read. So putting the link there just gives them the option, and I think it's good. Generally, when I'm reviewing resumes, I look at all of the links, assuming that I don't disqualify them immediately for some reason or another. But if they pass my first pass of a resume, then I'll go through all the links. Does that make sense? So I definitely recommend doing it. All right, anything else before moving forward? Cool. And then we didn't have a whole lot of time, but later I'll go through this independently and I'll share more feedback with you. All right, so back to the thing. We're going to be tight on time, but let's run with it. So on to interview tips. So first off, be on time. And if you're not on time, just apologize, okay? Don't sometimes stuff happens, like traffic or whatever, And that's totally okay. Don't let it throw you off your game, okay? Next thing is, and I can't believe I have to say this, but answer the questions they ask you, okay? This is not politics. You don't get points for dodging questions, okay? Answer the questions they ask you, answer them directly, okay? I have interviewed people where they don't answer the question, and if I have to ask you the same question twice, that's not good. That said, if you don't understand the question, ask for clarification. Totally fine. So like if I say, hey, how do you do database relationships? And then you're like, okay, are you asking if I know like the 3 types of relationships, or are you asking how I do normalization? It's like, oh, yeah. How do you do normalization? It's like, okay, yeah, I do this, right? Totally fine. Asking for clarification is fine. But make sure to answer the question eventually. When it comes to introductions, your introduction does not need to be your life story, okay? It does not need to be just a repeat verbatim of your resume. I have your resume, okay? You can just tell me who you are, like as a person, and then like maybe you can highlight some key points for your resume, but I don't need everything rehashed. Ideally, I've read it already, okay? When it comes to answering questions, if you don't know, say you don't know. At least for me, when I interview people, I try to get them to say I don't know at least once. If they don't say it at all, counts against them. Or something like I don't know. Oh, I don't know that, or I'm not very comfortable or familiar with that. Close enough, fine, cool, whatever. Because the reason that's important is that in communication and actual work, if you don't know something, sorry, I'm getting some vertigo. Yeah, I'm okay. I'm just going to hold on to this. I want to go this way. Sorry, I'm going to go a little slower because it's going to take me more effort to focus.
Get some drinks or...
Yeah, I'm sorry. Give me a second to get some water. Wait, is that a good idea? No, I'm just going to stay here. Don't worry about it. I'm fine. Let's keep going. No. It's okay. Really, it's okay. Oh, actually, you need that. Oh, you dropped your tea bag too. I guess she's okay. Yeah.
Too much work.
I think it's not enough water, actually. Because I was just thinking, man, I'm really thirsty. And then like a couple seconds after that, it was like, oh, here we go. Right, the I don't know thing. So oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. Okay. It should be better in a couple seconds. But yeah, the reason the I don't know stuff is important is because if I assign you work to do and you can't do that work for whatever reason because you don't have sufficient information or maybe you don't have the skills necessary, I need to know that so that I can either get you the information you need or provide you with a way to acquire the skills you need or get someone to help you, right? And if I can't rely on you to tell me that you don't know, that's a problem. So yeah. Be aware of different interview styles. So there's like tech interviews, culture interviews. There's even presentation interviews sometimes, which are more popular in the machine learning side of things. And there's also like whiteboarding, where they might have you like draw out an application architecture or even algorithms, where they'll have you write code in the interview. I have done all of these. They are very different ways of thinking. So you do want to get a little bit of experience with each one of them. If you're not in machine learning, maybe you don't need to worry about the presentation interviews so much. But everything else you at least want to be a little bit aware of. You want to read about it, all that kind of stuff. Now, if you're like, wait, Beege, you just listed 5 things that I'm not going to remember. It's in the presentation notes. When I share the presentation, you can just find it there. But tech interviews, culture interviews, presentation interviews, whiteboarding, and then algorithms, they're all different types of interviews, and you should be aware that these are things they could throw at you. Okay? And then this sounds weird, but review your own resume before the interview. You should have in recent memory what you wrote down, because that's exactly what they're going to ask you about, right? And it's highly likely that the manager is not going to have the presence of mind to be like, oh, wait, he doesn't remember exactly how he wrote out his resume. He's not going to be thinking like that. He's just going to be like, oh, you're looking at the same thing I am, right? So be familiar with your own resume. When it comes to behavioral or experiential questions, right? I don't know, how do you solve tough problems, right? There's the STAR method, which is describe the situation, describe the task to be accomplished, describe the action you took to accomplish that task, and then describe the results, okay? So anything that's about experience or about a way of doing things, use the STAR method, link in the presentation. Because the reason I mention this is because if you don't have a structure for describing these kinds of things, you may start rambling, or you may just answer in the wrong direction. So having a kind of template or structure to answer those kinds of questions can be very helpful. So far, so good. Any questions about this? Cool. All right, getting a little bit better. This is perfect. I know this is meant to be a funny meme, but that's exactly how you should be thinking before you walk into an interview. I am not joking. You should walk in there like, these guys want to get to know the awesome me, right? That's how you should be thinking. Exactly. Especially because, if you act like you already have so there's this thing in psychology, unfortunately, it's very popular in pickup artist circles, but it's a psychological trick where when two people meet for the first time, they're trying to figure out what kind of relationship they're going to have, right? They're trying to figure out if they're on the same level, if it's more like a service kind of thing, if it's more like a partnership kind of thing, if it's what kind of domains of knowledge you'll talk about, all of these different things about how do we structure the relationship between each of us, right? And pretty much the first person to set the stage sets the stage, right? So if you start treating them like, hey boss, what kind of stuff am I going to do for you this week? Then they're going to be like, okay, you're on my you're acting like someone on my team. I'm going to treat you like someone on my team. And that's not even a conscious decision. That's just something we do. So if you start acting like you already have the job, and you're just trying to help them understand you better as an employee, and trying to get a better understanding of the kind of work you're going to do, you win. Okay? So be confident, be personable. And one big thing to mention is the interview is about you. Okay? They're there to get to know you. Who is the expert on you? You are. Right? So you are the expert in what the conversation is going to be about. So act that way. Okay? Yeah, we're good now. So next thing is research the company in detail, right? With resumes, you may want to spam, but with interviews, you want to take the time to really understand the company. What kind of work do they do? What is the company mission? Do they have a specific mission or vision or goal? Do they have a list of core values? You want to memorize those before you get there. Who are their customers, right? What kind of problems do they solve? What kind of challenges might they run into, right? These are the kinds of things you want to know about before going into the interview, okay? Another thing is that interviews are bi-directional, okay? Yes, they are asking questions about you, but you're also getting to know them as a company. Do you want to work there, right? That's another purpose of the interview. You want to figure out if you want to work with those people. So be ready to ask them questions. Also, be aware of the interviewers, okay? What I mean by that is notice if some of them are distracted, or notice if any of them are nervous, because actually interviewing other people is also nerve-wracking, right? Because that hiring manager or whoever's interviewing you is a reflection of the company. They're representing the company to you, and that's a big burden, right? Both sides are nervous, and if any side is not nervous, it's a fucking act, okay? Or they have loads of experience doing this stuff. Even taking myself as an example, getting up here and speaking in front of people, I've been doing this kind of stuff since I was like 5. I've been in front of people since I was 5 years old, and I still get nervous. But you would never know it. It's just acting. That's all it is. And the same goes for the interviewer. The same goes for you as an interviewee. Everyone's acting. But the act is important. On that note, though, and I didn't put this in the notes, but maybe I'll add it later. Acknowledging the awkwardness of the situation or acknowledging someone's mental state is a great way to ease the tension. So like, there have been, on the interviewer side, I've seen candidates kind of like doing this stuff with their hands because they're like really nervous. And it's like, I'll pause the interview for a second. I'll be like, hey man, are you like really nervous? And it's like, oh, why? Well, your hands are ringing a lot. And I'm not criticizing you. I don't want to embarrass you, but like, I'm here to get to know you. And if you're nervous, I'm going to have trouble getting to know you. Right? So like, do you want to take a break? Do you want to go for a walk for a minute? Can I get you some water? Because like, we're just having a conversation here. And then like, it doesn't always work, but I try to get the person to calm down. And then the interview goes much more smoothly. You can also do that as a candidate. You can say to the interviewer like, hey man, are you okay? Like, that's totally fine. This whole like, oh, the interviewer has all the power in the interview. No, don't look at it like that. You are interviewing as equals, all right? Because they need to hire you as much as you need to be hired. Otherwise, they wouldn't be hiring. So yeah, be aware of the interviewers. Focus on people who are paying attention. The people who are really paying attention to you and really absorbing everything you say. When the interviewer, if you have multiple interviewers, if they're all talking together, the people who paid the most attention to you are likely the people who will advocate for you. All right? So you want to like, you're like, that person's going to be the person to try to hire me. I'm going to give them everything they want, right? And then the people who are distracted or the people who are just not paying attention or their attention is wandering, try to pull them in, right? Maybe you can ask them a question. If they introduce themselves and you know the kind of work they do, you can be like, if you get a related question, be like, oh, how does your company do it, right? Or like try to make eye contact or something. Just try to draw everyone in, okay? Big thing is practice. Practice. Whether it is mock interviews like we're going to do today, time permitting, yeah, we'll be good. And maybe not everyone agrees with this, but I recommend, even if you're happy at your current job, or if you're applying and there's a bunch of companies that maybe you're qualified for but you're not interested in, go interview anyway. Interviewing is its own skill set. You develop skills by practicing. Go practice. Okay? And even if, you're not necessarily interested in that company when you walk in, maybe, because the interview is bi-directional, maybe you end up learning about the company and you're like, actually, they're pretty cool. I might want to work with them. Like, my first job was at a cell phone insurance company. Like, when they're like, we want to interview you, I'm like, cell phone insurance. I was like, I'll go for it. Why not? Because it was the only call I got. And then when I talked to the hiring manager, I was like, he's really fucking cool. I want to work for him. And he ended up being like the best mentor I've ever had. So don't be afraid to interview, practice. And the nice part too is like, if you're interviewing at a company you don't care about, it's easier to be confident because you don't care about the result.
Yeah.
Right? And getting that confidence practice is very good. Like I remember when I interviewed at Riot Games the first time, not the first time, the only time. I was like, there's no way I'm getting this job. There's no way these guys are going to hire me. Like, what the hell? So I just went in there like totally carefree, like just like I'm just going to shoot the shit with these guys and just have a good time. I'm not going to worry about succeeding because I'm pretty confident I'm going to fail. And when I got to the last stage of the interview, the department director like gives you all the negative feedback and sees how you handle it and sees basically how you handle feedback generally. And when I got to that part, he's like, so this is the part where we tell you all the shitty things about you, and no one had anything bad to say about you. And I'm like, what the fuck? Right? So having that confidence, not worrying about like, oh, I have to get a good result, it's a big deal, okay? And practice is key with that. And then a couple more things is be ready with your own questions, right? So when you research the company, a lot of questions should arise like,
wait, so they do like medical analysis in hospitals? Like, how do they do that? Do they contract with each hospital? Do they like go through some other agency? Like, how do they do that? And that would be a valid question to ask during the interview, right? So any questions that you have, note them down. Maybe the hiring manager won't be able to answer all of them, but that's fine. You're showing an interest in the company. You're showing that you're thinking about the business. That's important. And then lastly, ChatGPT is actually good for this, for the practice aspect. So if I pull up ChatGPT here, where'd it go? Give me a second. So I also did, I told ChatGPT, now from the manager perspective, okay? Imagine I'm interviewing you for a job. You submitted the above resume, right? I'll ask you some questions. So tell me about the data security protocols you implemented, right? And this is a totally valid answer. Like, this is actually a damn good answer. And I was impressed. Like, ChatGPT did damn good. Now, granted, this is way more formal than I would expect an interview answer to be. But in terms of, like, all the key points, in terms of how they structured the information, all this kind of stuff, golden. Okay? It is missing a little bit of the context, but that makes sense because ChatGPT doesn't know what the context is, right? But generally, how to answer the questions is quite good. So I would recommend actually sharing a bunch of information about yourself with ChatGPT and then asking it to answer an interview question as if you were interviewing it with it acting as you, if that makes sense. Basically, give it all the information that you can so that it can try to be you and then act as a manager interviewing it, right? And then you can see its example answers to interview questions. Does that make sense? Yeah, I was like, I wonder if ChatGPT could do this. And I tried it and I was like, that's surprisingly good. Now granted, again, don't copy paste. Don't memorize its answers, right? And then give those exact answers, right? But use this to kind of inspire, okay, here's how I might structure an answer like that. Or here's the kind of key information I'd want to touch on. Okay? Does that make sense? Cool. So, get my notes back up here. Oh, we're perfect on time. Okay, so questions about the interview side of things. So,
The most common question, where do you see yourself in 10 years? How should we answer this question?
so the question was, how do we answer the common question of where you see yourself in 10 years? So now maybe this is just, or 5 years or whatever. Yeah, so if I got the 10 years question, I'd say like, and maybe this is just me being snarky, but I would say, hey man, if anyone could say where they'd be in 10 years with any level of accuracy, like they should be making a lot of money or something like that. I don't know, I'd make some joke about it. But for 5 years or 3 years or 2 years.
What does lie behind this question? Like what the interviewers want to, like maybe they want to hear you work for this company like for 4 years or 5 years, or you want to improve yourself and like be more like upper position in this company.
So for the stream, clarification was like why. What kind of answer are interviewers looking for? Why are they asking this question? Is it that, oh, I want to be a VP at your company in 5 years kind of thing? Like, so there's two ways to approach it. There is the, oh, I want to be at your company doing X kind of thing, which may or may not be true, but you should be truthful. And there's the, and that's the kind of thing that I'm having trouble structuring thoughts right now. I'm sorry. So there's the kind of places that are looking for the answer they want to hear, and there's the kind of places that are actually looking to get to know you. The kinds of places that are looking for the answer they want to hear, fuck them, right? So a whole like, oh, I want to be at company A in 5 years doing B for peanuts, right? Like, screw that.
I want to be family of this company.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, no, screw that. So when I actually got asked that question when interviewing here, and I said I actually gave a list of possibilities, right? Because I was like, I want to either be running my own business or in some kind of leadership role at this company doing this specific kind of thing, which I know the company isn't interested in right now, but maybe it'll change, right? Or I want to be doing teaching or something, right? So I gave a whole bunch of options of and I think that's a really good strategy in general because A, you're showing backup plans, and that's always good. B, you're showing them more about yourself, your interests, your goals, your aspirations. And I would say you don't have to, unless it's really short term, I would say you don't necessarily have to mention anything involving the company. And they can just kind of deal with that. But you can also be kind of generic where you can say, hey, I want to be an engineering manager in 3 years doing this kind of work. And then you can also follow up with do you think that's possible at this company, right? Because remember, it's bi-directional, right? There's something that you want as well. Check with them if you can get it there. So, but the reason they're asking is mostly they just want to know if your long-term plans match the long-term plans of the company. And so if a company asks 10 years, I'd be very suspicious. If they ask 5 years, I'd be they're quite optimistic. If they ask 2 years, that's totally realistic. But yeah. Does that make sense and answer your question? Other questions?
I have a question. The other thing is there is some culture or language barriers. You are really good at your work, but let's say I'm not good. I'm not fluent at Korean English, but I'm doing interview in English, or I'm not good at Korean and I do. How the interview evaluate you are trying, but a lack of if you don't have enough vocabulary, you cannot explain what you did or your experience.
So the question was if there's a language barrier like English or Korean or whatever, how do you kind of manage that? Is that right?
Yeah.
So
also how see the interest as a foreigner or is it okay or even you are not good? Do they see your value or they just it's not good?
So basically, can that make or break your interview? And I would say it definitely can. Because anytime that there's a language barrier, that creates some kind of cost to communication, right? And communication is already very costly. So it's a matter of what is their threshold for it to be acceptable. For example, in our company, part of the company was splitting off, so they had the option of either staying with the split off or rejoining the main company. And we had one engineer that was interested in rejoining the main company on our team, but they were Korean. Our team speaks all English, and we're like, okay, how's their English? So we had a conversation with them, and their English just wasn't good enough that we felt we could work together smoothly. We felt it would be too much effort to communicate such that we couldn't get work done efficiently. So that's definitely a possibility. And that every team is going to have a different threshold for that, right? And that's something you don't have control over. But what you can do is try to minimize the difficulty. So for example, when I first came to Korea, I worked at a Korean company. Everyone had some level of English skill, but not excellent, and I had zero Korean skill. So during interviews and stuff, they had whiteboards in the room, and I'd just be whiteboarding as I talked, right? Or I'd use hand gestures, right? So I'd say so the database, right? Because databases are commonly drawn as a cylinder, so I'd be the database, I connected it to here using SQL, and kind of hand gesture, right? So use all of the communication tools at your disposal, whether it's drawing, hand gesturing, inflection, these kinds of things, to kind of
to be more clear, it's a software engineer or a research engineer, where you don't use you're not salesman or you're not manager for engineers.
Yeah. So I'm saying all that from an engineering perspective, right? So the question was like, hey, if this question is tailored specifically for engineering, I think all of what I said still stands. It is a little bit easier for engineering because a lot of the terms are English terms, even if they're Koreanified. But on the other hand, if you know that a team speaks mostly English or mostly Korean, you can kind of study the relevant vocabulary, right? So, for example, my Korean is like pretty good in food and pretty good in IT and trash everywhere else, right? So I know like haegyo, right, like connection. Or I know that they just use network for networking, right? These kinds of things. So you kind of pick up what you can for that specific area. Or if it's something like reverse engineering, right? You want to know how to say a byte stream or how to decompile, right? Or if they even, I don't even know if there are Korean words for these terms, but you want to kind of study the vocabulary that's relevant to what you would describe. So basically, you could try to do an interview question of yourself with ChatGPT and then be like, okay, how much of this could I say in Korean? Are there words that I can try to pick up? Does that make sense? Mm. And that's kind of the benefit of engineering too, is like the vocabulary space is very strict actually.
Yeah.
Whereas like with sales and business, it's all over the place, but we have it a little easier in that regard. But yeah. Other questions?
Is it okay to include a project which is not finished? Or
Yeah.
if you are working on it, like, it's like not completely documented that you're working on it, and is it okay to include that to the resume with other projects or?
Mm. So the question was, is it okay to include incomplete projects on resumes or discussion during interviews or whatnot? Yes, absolutely. Just make it clear that it's still in progress. And I think as long as you do that, it's fine. I've had a bunch of interviewees, and I'll like, okay, where are you at? And then what do you think the end state is, right? And then that gives me a clear idea of like, and then I can ask them, and that's actually kind of a unique opportunity, because then I can ask them, so what kind of problems do you think you'll run into? What do you think the hard parts will be, right? And that shows how they can predict issues, how well they can predict how long things take, and that's actually kind of nice from a manager perspective, because it gives a good idea of how they'd work on an actual project. Does that make sense? So I would definitely include it.
Yep, my last question, I should have asked earlier. When you put your dates on your resume, like
Mm.
there must be some gaps, like 6 months you didn't work.
Mm.
And how does it affect for your interview or your hiring process? Like,
Mm.
I did once, like I took 2 months off. I quit my job and just traveled a little bit, and I invited my family to travel to Italy. And then I went for interview, and the company CEO told me, like, he get kind of how can it possible? Like he was asking, like, how did you leave like without work?
Mm.
That kind of question he gave me, and I was surprised because I'm really okay, like not working around 6 months if I have enough money.
Mm. Yeah.
But the someone is hiring you and checking your resume, if there is some gaps, and maybe does it give negative effect?
So the question was, does a gap in your resume give a negative effect? So it depends on the company. Like everything is always, it depends, right? I would say companies where it does have a bigger effect, a bigger negative effect, you may want to be a bit suspicious. Like, why is this a big deal to them? Generally, I don't ask about gaps as a hiring manager, but I'm much more on the progressive side. But I totally ignore gaps because I'm like, I don't care what you did in that time. If you want to tell me, that's
They
fine. But
just think you tried to get job and you failed, and like you went, maybe you went to a lot of interviews and you get a job. And does it show your weakness?
yeah, so I would avoid saying that. Because yes, that could show like, okay, why did no one else want to hire you, right? And that doesn't necessarily give a solid, like, okay, I'm not going to hire this person, but it does kind of prime them to say that. Because they're like, especially in Korea where it's very collectivist, right? So it's like, hey, if no one else wants to hire this guy, why should I be the odd one out? So I would, like, obviously don't try to cover it up. Don't lie on your resume. But do downplay it if they ask. Just be like, I just wanted to take some time off. And just leave it at that. They don't need to know what you were doing. If they ask, and be like, oh, I did some work here and there. I, looked at some companies here and there. Just make it sound really casual. Make it sound like you're just chilling. Yeah. Does that make sense? Other questions before we... Actually, we only got 10 minutes left. So we're going to do this fast. But we're going to do a live mock interview. And unfortunately, we're not going to have time for the peer stuff because we have another group coming in at 6. But we can at least do the live one. And then if you guys want to do the peer stuff afterwards while the other event is going on, you can do it right outside here. That's totally fine. But for now, Jason shared his resume with me. And we're going to do a very quick mock interview. I was hoping to have 30 minutes, but we're too far behind. But that's all right. So let me pull this up. And Jason, just to double check, you're still okay with...
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, great. So let me...
Where do I need to be?
Can you sit in that chair and take that microphone? There we go. All right, so I'm putting his resume up here. His anonymized resume. And I'm going to... Let me check the broadcast.
Work.
You got to push and hold the button.
Hello, test. 1, 2, 3.
Can I see?
Test. Hold it.
There you go.
Okay. Hello. Okay.
Great. And this is more for the recording than for that.
Yeah.
Oh, let me get your resume out, actually. All right. So, I also do this. Okay. Not having a table is interesting. All right, so let's try this. All right, so we only got a few minutes, so I'm going to try to go as fast as I can. So first off, as a hiring manager, what they'll usually do is they'll print out your resume, and they'll have it all marked up. Like you see, I got a whole bunch of notes and questions and stuff here. And I'll put it on the thing later. But anyway, a good hiring manager will be taking some kind of notes during the interview. So don't try to read into when they're writing or typing or whatever. It could be for any reason. So let's get going. All right, so we're going to skip introduction stuff just because of time.
Yep.
And we're going to focus on, because of what's on the screen here, we're going to focus on the top half. So, so I'd go through, I'm going to think out loud for a bit before I start asking questions. So, I've gone through here, I've said, okay, cool, he's got backend experience, he's done various API frameworks, he's got SQL experience with an ORM bit, he is metrics driven, he has a whole bunch of metrics on here. He has different architecture patterns like layer architecture and event-driven architecture. He has testing, that's good. So then I'm going to skip, like it's clear that he has experience, so I'm going to skip all the basic stuff. And then I'm going to ask more of the clarifying questions to see if what you've done is relevant to us. So I might ask like, okay, so you did API development. I saw that you did fast API. Were you guys using more REST or RPC?
REST, no RPC.
No RPC. Okay,
Yeah.
so just for my comfort, can you just explain briefly what REST is to me?
REST is representational state transfer. They rely on TCP and the verbs like put, post, patch, delete, get, and they usually just send it through just whatever TCP connection. You can send JSON bodies, return them, and then you have HTTP status responses like 200 and 400 and 500, blah blah stuff like that. Yeah.
Great. Now, quick note. So he obviously has a whole bunch of experience. That was a lot of detail, but not all the exact tiny details. Given the way that he explained it, that he kind of touched on everything in a way that kind of showed that he was knowledgeable of it. I'm not going to dive into the individual little bits because it's clear he knows it already. If he was more junior, I might be like, okay, what does each verb do, right? But that's cool. So Now there may be times where the manager doesn't know stuff, and that's okay. Actually, that's better because that implies they're a better manager. If they ask you, "Hey, I don't know what unit of work is in your 4-layered architecture. Can you explain that to me?"
So to explain the unit of work thing, I have to explain the concept of repositories first and like different, domain boundaries. So like in domains, so domain is like a business kind of a unit of business. So I work with e-commerce, so like a product would be a domain, and delivery would be a domain, and the repository is a way to access the product data or delivery data that is stored in the database through like an abstraction layer. So the repository can do add, get, list, remove, and the specific implementation of that through like an ORM or whatever is whatever. You can do whatever you want, but like the repository is abstracted away, and through that, and each repository accesses like a different business domain model, and those repositories are grouped under one unit of work. You can have one unit of work or multiple units of work for different domains, but anyway, a unit of work is just literally just what it says on the tin. When you do some sort of when you get some kind of request and you want to process it, you make a single unit of work where you can access many different domain models and do all of the changes at once, or just like access one and do all the changes once, and then when you do commit, the changes get committed into the database, and that's just like a good way of just organizing code and logic and business logic all in like different layers, and that's how you do it. Yeah.
Okay, so how is the unit of work different from a service layer then?
So the unit of work is just a class that we used, and this unit of work gets in that specific logic is implemented in the service layer. So a repository is a class, a unit of work is a class. That is just because they're just layers, right? Repositories are database access, unit of works are repository access, and in the service layer, we implement a unit of work as like different handlers. So like a create handler would use a unit of work to access the product, to create a new product and commit it, and that would be one handler. So each service would have a unit of work as a dependency, and we would just use that to do things like one by one each. Yeah.
Okay, I see. So would it be accurate to say then that a service layer does kind of business abstraction and the unit of work does technical abstraction? Does that sound about right? Or
it is roughly correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So in an actual interview with more time, as a hiring manager, I want to kind of understand okay, why did you opt for this as opposed to 3 layers? What were the benefits? That kind of stuff. But because our time is limited, I'm just going to move on.
Yep.
And then I see, okay, you mentioned that you implemented this for 40 different endpoints. Are you saying that you created 40 different endpoints, or that they existed and you refactored them with
They
structure?
already existed, and I refactored a lot of them. So the initial implementation of these abstract classes and those specific implementations of the classes was done by another person, and then he didn't have time to actually just refactor everything else. And so I just refactored everything because I just had the time. So yeah, I just stepped up. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, great. So now I kind of want to explain why I was asking these questions as a hiring manager. So first off, I want to understand so for the REST ones, I asked because I want to make sure that he understands REST, because that's what we use in our team, right? So if he understands the theory, and he's done it in practice, he can implement it, so I have that covered. In terms of application architecture, I want to understand, what he did, right? So I have an understanding of what he was working with. And then I ask about how exactly he implemented it or why he implemented it, so I can know, okay, did he come up with this architecture? If so, I would ask why. Did he choose to do it that way? If he did it as a refactor, right, then I know that he has refactoring skills, he knows how to work with existing code, and I can just trust him to kind of handle that rather than have to walk him through those kinds of things. So yeah, I apologize that our time is limited, but maybe we can do one more? Oh, yeah, here we go. So, so with the Get API optimization, your 95% speed increase here.
Yeah.
Why exactly did you want to avoid joins, and why did you think materializing views would avoid them?
So I sort of viewed any operation that the database engine does with the query as a cost. So like a join would internally, the database would probably like, do some kind of loop to join the tables.
Oh.
Yeah, that's they do it in C, so it's really fast.
Oh, you're saying the database implementation. Okay.
Yeah, the actual database implementation. So like, even though it's in C, I think it would just do all that, and just like having the engine have to just do that many calculations, that would, I think, make the engine slower. And any other kind of weird stuff that we have to do with like filtering or whatever, and group bys and all that stuff, and aggregation, because APIs get really complicated. So the method that we thought was, hey, why don't we just denormalize all the tables and put it into one table with a lot of duplicate data, and so that we only have to do select, join, and where, and we can put lots of indexes there to make the searching stuff much faster. And one way that we chose out of a bunch of different ways that we considered was the materialized view, because at that time that was the simplest and the, I guess, most quickest way to do it, because we didn't have a lot of time. We were a very busy startup, and so that was one way we did it. And the other one is, what was the question again? Yeah.
So why did you think that would avoid joins, or why did you think avoiding joins was?
Yeah. Joins are costly. Yeah.
So, kind of meta stuff now, real quick.
Yeah.
Oh right, my mouse is there. Hello. We're finishing up the previous and
Okay,
almost
okay.
done. So question: how well do you know the database engine internal workings?
Not that well. I just try to think that where would be implemented as like an if, and anything related to joins and group bys. If I think about it implementing in a programmatic way, even though it's fast, it would be I guess like more complicated than an if. So I haven't dived too deep into database engine internals. I only know a little bit about indexes, but not really how the query optimization works and stuff like that. Yeah.
So I would be careful with that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Because that's not how they work.
Yeah.
And like, if a manager is a vindictive asshole, they might be like, you're wrong.
Yeah.
So if you did mention that you thought that was how it worked, which implies that it was an assumption.
Yeah.
And making assumptions is fine, but I would kind of emphasize that a little bit more. And like, I made this assumption, right? But then they might ask you, okay, why did you make that assumption, or what evidence did you have to support that assumption? And generally, like, try to avoid assumptions if you can. But given that this is related to your work, that is an assumption you made as part of your work, I'd say it's totally fine. Just kind of emphasize that it was an assumption. So yeah, is that we're out of time now, but is that a little bit helpful for everyone, at least, seeing this kind of process here? Cool. All right. Well, thank you, Jason. Really appreciate it. But for now, we gotta end this. So let's go through the end stuff real quick. Where is my? Yeah. Okay. So, as mentioned. Okay. Static Shock. So as mentioned, if you would like to do peer resume reviews and peer mock interviews, you're welcome to do so out here while the next event is going on. But other than that, just to reiterate, we went over resume tips today along with a live resume review. We went over some interview tips with a live mock interview. And hopefully you guys can have some time to do some peer stuff. So I have some additional resources and references linked right here. Hey, Tom. So feel free to take a look at that, and I'll share the presentation on Discord in a little bit. So thank you for coming. As usual, I'm Beege. We are Code Soul. If you scan this QR code, you can join our Discord channel, or you can just click the link if I can not have... Whoop. There we go. Just fixing the stream to actually be able to show the link. Additionally, if you want to donate, donations go there. We are not tax deductible yet. We're at the point where we can't apply to become a tax deductible company. I just need to do it and then pay $3,000. But we're working on it. So yeah, but hope to see you on Discord. Thank you for coming, and we hope to see you next time. We hope this is helpful. If you have more questions or want to do more practice, message us on Discord. Okay, thanks everyone.